I'm here to solve this statue park by Jeffrey Bardon called Lost in a Labyrinth. It has an elegant all-white clue theme, and we had a puzzle like this a few months ago, where one of the key steps will probably be figuring out if we can just place 12 pentominoes in this grid. So many cells are marked off, that will be somewhat limiting. And one way I like to do that, I'm just going to turn on number as an additional option here at the start, is to think about some clues that, or some cells that, for instance, if I were shading sort of through this space, there are some choke points where like not shading cell 1 is going to mark off a lot of space. And coming in from this W, sort of on the corner, if I shaded this cell and the cell and the cell and the cell, this cell, this 2 is an important place. Even if I'm coming through from here, not having the 2 marked would mark off a lot of cells. So these are some key spots to go at. That suggests that if I put in another pentomino, I'm going to turn on borders and mark a note here. There's probably a pentomino that is somewhere around the center cell, and probably this upper right is the most sure because it would want to be distinct from the 2. But any of these cells could potentially be used or left unshaded, but this would be 3. Coming off of this, I could take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So have a 4th here. I could make like a Y pentomino shape and get down to this cell, but this would be an important 5th. That gets me to where there's a 6th one probably around the square, but not the same as this 5. I could get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But notice I can't wrap all the way around this corner. If I shaded pentomino, used all these cells, I would isolate the squares. So something coming in from here like this, or something coming down like this, are marking potential cells. And I could get, as long as I don't go too far in, another in here, but there's something like pentomino 7 that's going to be in one of these cells. I don't know which for sure. Coming back to our thinking then, we could be shading around this corner, but we can't start down from this cell. So here is the earliest a required cell for pentomino 8 would be. That means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here's a 9th. And now I've got a space where I've got 3 more to place, and it looks like I've got plenty of room to place 3, but I don't have anywhere near enough room to place 4. It's pretty convincing that I don't have 4 spots up top. So one way to start this grid is to get the sense that I'm hopefully showing you that I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sure cells, 3 general placements, and 3 more upper left sort of area general placements not yet numbered in the grid. And so you may not recognize how like these 6 gray cells are easy starting points. Actually, there's more I can do. Like you can't actually shade to isolate this corner. So these cells aren't possible. So actually you can shade all the way to here. With the 1, I can't shade all the way into the cell with the 5. So the 5 always has to take 1 more, which means this 4 takes 2 more. So, and there are ways to start to build out by thinking about the shading, but starting from these seeds by just numbering how I put 12 in the grid is one way to go through this puzzle. A different way, which may be where more people started, is probably to look at some shapes. And one thing to recognize, this pattern, Lost in the Labyrinth, is very maze-like. So a lot of the grid is just snake-like. So all cells that have 2-way, but not 3-way or 4-way junctions. A 4-way junction is actually very rare in a maze. And my guess is one shape that's going to be key is this X shape. Other things that are rare in mazes are going to be 2x2 boxes. So where I've marked 3 and 6 in this way, they're actually the only 2x2 boxes I see, and that's the P. And the last kind of most constrained pentomino is often just this straight I, and there's a straight I that can be up here. There's a straight I that might look like it could be down here, but right now that would actually group 2 pentominoes together. These would group 2 pentominoes together, so I'm pretty sure that this is the only spot for an I, having marked 7 and 6. Yeah, where there are 2 spots for the P, what I haven't done is tried to look for you for where is the X, and that's going to be just scanning the grid. There are no 4-way junctions at the top. I see this 4-way junction down at the bottom, and that's the only one I'm seeing. So pentomino 6 in my nomenclature is an X, and the X can be the very first pentomino people place in this grid, which is pretty cute. It's one of the more limited pentominoes and often is at the end of a puzzle. But one intention from this constructor is likely to have the X be first That means we can now come back and say that the P for sure is around that center square, and the I, now that we've actually eliminated these bottom options, is up at the top. But whether you started with XPI or if you started, as I did, with all these other marks around the grid, these are now all solid seeds for how to work through the next stages of this puzzle. This lower right corner will always have to take this cell, which means that this pentomino here will always have to take these and not be able to take more, so the W is in for sure. This will now be a V or an L. Having marked in all these cells around the P, this pentomino 7 actually always has to take this cell. It could come down all the way here, but now this is required. Where the 8 and the 9 were here, what we haven't done is marked around the top. There's sort of a space where coming through here or coming through here, one of these two cells is going to be marked. And that then leaves, this is a key cell, actually both of these is a key cell for the others. So I've got 1, 2, potentially 3 pentominoes, but I still have some flexibility in this one that one or the other of these blue cells will be part of that shape. But notice that then means for this cell here, this can't come and take all these cells. It can at most take out to this third cell in this row, but not go above, so it always has to take 2 down. That means this group 8 has to take 1, 2, 3, 4, marking off the white cells getting connected. 5, it finishes as a U shape. That now means that this 9 isn't a U shape, it has to be a V shape. It could be this V or this V, but marking in this V, I see I would put a V right above straight away with how the other pentomino is going to need to go. So this is the lower V shape. And having that in the grid, now let's look back at other spots we were looking at. This corner in the lower right could be a V or an L, but the V is now in the grid, so this is an L. This pentomino marked with a 7 has to come up, and if it took this L, it would be another L, so this is an N. And that's known for sure. We said that shading all these would form a V in the grid, so this is always part of this pentomino. If I don't use this cell, I have to form a U with this shape. Again, this shape is different from this shape and these don't join. Do I know more than that right now? I'm not sure I do, but this is a good start. If I don't take this cell, then this is going to be an L or a V, and those are both in the grid. So I do take this cell. That means this I has to come over one more, and that means this cell is not part of a pentomino. If I don't take this cell here, I get a V in the grid, so I do take this. Actually, if I shade all the way from here, I now get an N. N is also in the grid already. So I can mark these in. So this will be pretty limiting in how we're marking things. That's kind of the upper right, which we haven't looked at yet. If I don't take this cell, I always form an L, so I do take this. If I don't take this cell, I have a V or a U, so I do have to take this. So this is a Y or a T. For this group 2, if I start from here, I get a W. If I start from here, I get a W or an N. Those are both in the grid, so these are bad cells. If I don't shade this cell, I get an N in the grid. That's already there. If I don't shade this cell, I get an N in the grid, so this has to be in. If I don't shade this cell, I get a U, so this is shaded. So now I have a T or an F around this. I've got a T or a Y around this. This actually looks like this pentomino is now also constrained. If I don't take this cell, I get a V. So this is now a T or a Y. So I've got two spaces that are TY. That means this is not a T, this is an F. But looking back at my inventory, the most constrained pentomino at this moment is a Z. And this is the only one that can be the Z, and this is the only Z. So marking in the Z is now going to set off a cascade that finishes the puzzle. So Z gives me the sure P. That forces this to be a T up top with the I into the corner. That means that this upper right is not a T, it's a Y. And that now forces one last spot for the F. So we finished the grid. So hopefully you got some sense through this video of some different constraints and things to think through of pentomino puzzles. My solve was certainly helped by starting by just marking where the 12 can go and getting some key cells, particularly these ones that were marked with the numbers, as we got around the grid that always had to be shaded. And you'll see the solution does require those ones I marked in to work that way. So if you're looking back at this video, figuring out how to divide the grid in that mode is really useful. The other thing for sure was looking at some of these more constrained shapes, and the labyrinth theme made the X stand out, but also the P. and the eyes stand out as other starting points. So really enjoyed the puzzle, Jeffrey, so thanks for it. Hopefully, for the rest of you, you enjoyed this video and learned some tips and tricks for future puzzles, and we'll see you again soon.